Okay, so we are 75 participants now. People are still dropping in, and I'm just going to start. I want to welcome you to our 13th webinar on policy updates on the packaging and packaging waste regulation, which we all waited for a while, and now the negotiations are done. And we are going to have an update on what are the obligations. As I said, please rename yourself, put your organization or your company behind your name. That would be great. You can use reactions in the chat during the whole webinar. Please feel free to ask any questions you have during the webinar and put it in the chat. We have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, at the end of the panel discussion, and we'll pick up your questions. We will also share the replay afterwards on our Reuse channel on YouTube. If you go to Planet Reuse and on YouTube, you will find all the recordings of the last webinars. Yes, Anna will share the link to the YouTube channel if you can, Anna, and if you have it, so you can have a look at that later. I want to introduce you to Planet Reuse very quickly. It's the first European online platform and network bringing together professionals to connect, learn, and collaborate on the topic of reuse and reusable packaging solutions. The platform went live in September 2022, and today we have already nearly 1,200 registered members from over 600 organizations. Mainly companies, but also other institutions, municipalities, organizations. They're all from the reuse orbit, a lot of them providing reuse solutions, others using reuse solutions. So yes, it's already a big community. My name is Nicole Seyring. I'm happy to moderate the session today. And here with me today from the team is Anna Desogus. Anna, can you wave, please? She is placed in Poland, and she is organizing our network expert in Central and Eastern Europe. Also, we have on board here today Katharina Papp. Katharina, can you? Yes. Who is the community coordinator of Estonia. And with us is Nino Yanashia. He works from the GIZ, but also cooperates with us on a new hub in Georgia. And we, Nino, can I see you? Maybe if you're there, you can wave. There she is. And also we have Marcel Koinov from the KIDV, who is part of the Planet Reuse team. So we are here with full capacities, and in particular, I say hello to participants from Poland and Estonia and other new countries, because one of our main projects in this year is also to reach out to new countries, to other countries in Eastern and Southern Europe to expand the network and also the idea of reusable packaging. Yes, before we go to the topic, we have a little question for you. It's our icebreaker question, and the question is, and you can just answer in the chat with a number, how often have you had a look in the new paragraphs, texts, and tables of the new PPWR in the last 2 weeks? So how often did you open any documents of the PPWR? It can be 0, or it can be, I don't know, Ulysse, up to 100, I don't know. So just answer with a nice number to us in the chat. And while you are doing this, just reflecting on, okay, how much did you personally deep dive already in the new document? I will give you some more words on introduction to the topic. Yeah, we will have a real deep dive today into the PPWR. The negotiations for this regulation on packaging took about 1.5 years, and finally a political agreement between the Parliament and the Council was reached on the 4th of March. For the first time, reuse and refill is introduced as a concept to prevent packaging waste in EU legislation. And now, as a result, we have a document not 100% final yet, and Ulysse will say some words about this, but also no tremendous changes probably are expected anymore. And we will also talk about the expected timeline of adoption. We deep dive in this webinar into the new provisions and also the effects of the PPWR on reuse business. And therefore, we also invited 3 companies, and I will introduce them to you in a minute, from different sectors who shortly speak about their experience and their expected results and effects of the PPWR. So I'd like to introduce you to the speaker, and the main speaker here is Ulysse Revat Dontenwill from New Era. New Era is the new European Reuse Alliance, and he joined New Era last summer, where he focuses on European and international advocacy. Ulysse has a background in business administration and holds a master's degree in political science and ecological transformation. His professional path led him to the circular economy sector. Initially, he was a consultant in waste management before transitioning to European public affairs. Yes, and Ulysse will give us a deep dive into the provisions of the PPWR. He prepared a presentation for us, but afterwards we have a talk with 3 companies, and I also want to introduce you to the speakers there. It's Eva de la Torre Sans. Eva, did you join us again? From Corplex. She is head of marketing from Corplex, a French-based but international operating company doing reusable transport and e-commerce packaging. Then we have Davide Mazzanti. Davide, can you? Yes, there he is. Who is the CEO and co-founder of Sykell. And Sykell is a German-based company running an open pool system for reusable packaging for takeaway food and beverages, working together with also big supermarkets like the Rewe Group in Germany. And Sykell provides also service to efficiently manage reusable assets, the new product circular ERP. And then we have Thomas Nickel, the 3rd speaker. He is a product manager at Sielaff. Sielaff is a company also based in Germany, producing vending machines for food, drink, snacks, and also hygiene products, but also reverse vending machines for the takeback of bottles, of cups and boxes. Very nice to have you on board and that you took the time to give us your view on the PPWR after the presentation. Yes, now we start with Ulysse. As I said, we collect your questions during the presentation, so please use the chat to do so. Ulysse, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for this introduction. Let me share my screen and tell me if it works. Can you see my screen properly?
Yes.
Yes, all good.
Well,
okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Nicole, for inviting me to this presentation. So, as Nicole said, my name is Ulysse Revat Dontenwill. I'm working at New Era as the Public Affairs Coordinator. And today I will do a little presentation on the policy update on the packaging waste and packaging waste regulation. But first, I would like to introduce a bit New Era, so the New European Reuse Alliance and its mission. So we are a trade association representing reuse and refill businesses involved in various activities such as manufacturing, delivery, washing, and present in various sectors. So for example, HoReCa, FMCG, e-commerce. We represent over 50 members from 8 different European countries, including national association and European sectoral association. And our mission is to influence key EU and national policy to shape the legal incentives, infrastructure and financing model that will accelerate the transition from single use to reuse. And here you can see a small picture we took at the last General Assembly we had in Haar in 2023. So what's the agenda of today's presentation? First, I will start with a brief introduction, and then I will deep dive into the content of the PPWR agreement with a particular focus on reuse and refill. Then we'll have a look also at the flexibility disposition in the text. And finally, we'll conclude with a brief conclusion and see a bit the timeline of the PPWR. So let's start with a bit of context on the PPWR. Even though I'm sure that most of us are familiar with this regulation, I think it's important to start so we are all on the same page. So what's the packaging and packaging waste regulation? First of all, it's important to know that it's the revision of a former text called the PPWD, so the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive that was lastly amended in 2018. But in 2022, the Commission has proposed to review this directive by changing the legal instrument from a directive to regulation, so from the PPWD to the PPWR. The main difference here between those two instruments is application. A directive, when it's promoted, it has to be implemented afterwards by the member states within their national legislative framework. In a way, the directive sets the goal to be achieved, and the member states can use like any legal mean they want to achieve this goal. On the other hand, the regulation is binding, it's in entirety and directly applicable in all member states. Therefore, the general purpose of the PPWR is to reduce the negative environmental impact of packaging and packaging waste while improving the functioning on the internal market. What about the process? So the PPWR was presented, as I said, in the end of November 2022 and has been negotiated over the year 2023 and early 2024. It was a fast-paced and intense process. Fast-paced first because of the upcoming election. As you are aware, there's the European election coming in June, and the objective was to find an agreement that could be voted on at the final plenary session of the European Parliament in the end of April of this year. And it was very intense as well because of the intense lobbying of which the text was the subject. I'm sure if you have followed a bit the text, you have heard about the practices used by the single-use lobbyist. It was very intense. It has been singled out many times on very occasion in the press, but also by policymakers. It obviously had an influence on the text. But at the end, it's also important to know that the president of the parliament, Roberta Metsola, launched an investigation against those aggressive, let's say, lobbying practice. And the lobbying was particularly focused on two articles. So the article 20, 22, and 26. So the one that deals with the restriction of certain formats of packaging and on reuse. But eventually, a provisional agreement was reached. It was 2 weeks ago on the 4th of March among the co-legislator, and it's this agreement that we will analyze today during this presentation. I've written here on the slide provisional agreement because the agreement is resulting from an informal negotiation process that's called the trilogue. So where you have the Commission, the Council, and the European Parliament sitting together. And so they found an agreement together, but now it has to be accepted by the European Parliament and then by the Council. But maybe you have heard that recently it has been accepted by the Coreper last Friday, and yesterday it was accepted by the ENVI committee at the Parliament. And I will go a bit deeper into the timeline at the end of this presentation. Now, I'd like to share with you like a brief look to the text as a whole, because the PPWR is a very wide-ranging text that addresses many subjects and not only reuse and refill. So here I have listed some key articles. I won't go into the details of all of them, obviously, but just showcase some of them that are pretty interesting. So first, the Article 5. This one aims to reduce and control the use of PFAS within packaging. We also have the Article 7, which sets out targets for minimum recycled content in plastic packaging. We have the Article 22 and its famous, let's say, Annex 5, that will introduce a restriction of a number of packaging formats. So we have, for example, the restriction for single-use packaging for fruit and vegetable weighing less than 1.5 kilograms. And also we have the ban on single-use plastic packaging for goods and beverage that are filled and consumed within the premises in the HoReCa sector. This one is a really important one for our sector. We also have the Article 44 on separate collection and DRS for single-use plastic bottles and beverage and metal beverage, sorry. And also the Article 38 And this one states that member states must reduce packaging waste generated per capita by 5% in 2030, 10% in 2035, and 15% in 2040 compared to the base year 2018. So now you have like a bit a better idea of the whole text. And of course, there is the items on reuse and refill. And now that's what we are going to focus on. And starting with the reuse requirements. Do you also see the small line in my screen in the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know how to remove it, but I think it's not too disturbing. Okay. So yeah, the requirements. Beside proposing a definition of reuse and refill in the Article 3, the PPWR also sets out obligation to which reuse packaging must conform, and the criteria it must follow. So in the Article 10, it defines what is considered reusable packaging. Here on this slide, I've collected a few points of the article, but it's obviously a bit more detailed. So if you want to have a closer look at it, I invite you to look at the text. But first, reusable packaging has to be reused multiple times. Also, it has to accomplish as many rotations as possible. If you have followed the negotiation, you might remember that the Council had proposed in his version of the text a minimum number of rotation. It was 10, I think. But as you see in the text, it has not been retained within the text. But there will be a delegated act that will be taken 2 years after the entry into force of this legislation to define a minimum number of rotation for reusable packaging. Also, it has to be effectively reused, so it can be emptied, refilled, and with keeping its function on quality and safety as well. Also, I think that's something important to keep in mind. The other provision of the text also apply to reusable packaging. So they must fulfill the requirements regarding consumer health, safety, and hygiene. They also have to be recyclable, as it is proposed in the Article 6. And they are also subject to the obligation relating to the incorporation of recycled content in Article 7, as just presented in the previous slide. Article 23 and 24 set down the obligation to reusable packaging and reuse system. Here, those two articles refer to Annex 6, and I will present it in the next slide. However, there are 2 points to keep in mind. First one is that economic operator, they can delegate to a third party the responsibility to ensure the compliance with the requirements of a mutualized reuse system. The second thing is within a closed loop system, reusable packaging must be returned to collection points approved by the system operator. So now let's deep dive a step further into the requirements and have a look to this Annex 6. This annex is covering the requirements specific to reuse and also for reuse system, and for refill station. Particularly, it's define some terms. So as you can see on the screen, there's the governance guideline, the closed loop system, open loop system as well. And there's 2 other definitions on system operators and system participants. I invite you to have a look at it because it helps to understand a bit how they thought about how the system should be at the European level. Also, in this annex, it's divided in 3 parts. We have a first part, so the part A, that really defines the requirements for system of reuse. So it's general requirements and then specific requirements for closed loop system and open loop system. The part B defines the requirements for reconditioning process, and the part C, it addresses the requirements for refill and more precisely the requirements that refill station should fulfill. Well, now that we have seen a bit the requirements that packaging and the system of reuse and refill have to meet, let's deep dive into the reuse targets. And we will start with the so it's the Article 26, and we will start with the first paragraph on transport or sell packaging used for transporting products and including e-commerce as well. Here it refers to foldable plastic boxes, for example, trays, plastic crates, intermediate bulk container, etc. It's all explained within the article. So if you want the detail of the formats, I'll let you have a look at it. But what does it say, this article? So from 2030, economic operator using such packaging should ensure that at least 40% of such packaging is reusable within a system of reuse. And from 2040, it goes up to 70%. However, and it's important to have it in mind that the targets for 2040, they are not binding. Indeed, like the formulation within the text, it says economic operator shall hand over instead of shall ensure, which would be binding in this case. Also, we have the paragraph 2 and 3 of the article 26. This one is for the economic operator using transport packaging or cell packaging used for transporting a product, but between different sites, or used between different economic operator within a member states. In this situation, the economic operator shall ensure that packaging is reusable within a system of reuse. So the way we understand it, so there is no specific target, it means that 100% of those packaging should be reusable by 2030. So that was for the objective. And now if you have a look at the right of the screen, there is also the exemption. So this exemption applies like to the three aforementioned paragraph that I just described. So these obligations, do not apply to transport packaging or cell packaging used for dangerous good, for large-scale machinery, equipment, and commodities for which packaging are custom designed. Unfortunately, we don't have a definition of custom design, but that's something that we will ask the Commission to have some clarity of what do they mean by custom design. Also, it does not apply to flexible packaging used for transportation that is in direct contact with food and feed and food ingredients. And finally, cardboard boxes are exempted. The article 26 of the PPWR, within its paragraph 5, also lays down obligations. So this is at the end of the slide for group packaging So from January 2030, economic operators using group packaging in the form of boxes, excluding cardboard, should ensure that at least 10% of them are reusable, and for 2040, it's 25%. And once again here, the target for 2040 is not binding. Let's now turn our attention to the reuse objective for beverages. So this is the paragraph 8 of the article 26, and this paragraph was a big part of the negotiation, and in the end, the co-legislator agreed on the following targets, so 10% by 2030 and 40% by 2040. However, these objectives are subject to numerous exemptions, which come in two types. First is like exemption by product categories, and the other exemption is for economic operators. Let's start with the paragraph 9 and the exemption regarding the product categories. So are exempted from the reuse target the beverage considered as highly perishable milk and milk products, the product categories of grape, wine product, and aromatized wine. Wine is also exempted. Also wine product obtained from fruits or other than grape and vegetables, and also other fermented beverages. And also are exempted from the targets, the alcohol-based spirituous beverages. Now the exemption for the economic operators. So they are exempted, the one that have a sale area of no more than 100 meters square. Here, like the Commission is empowered to adopt a delegated act to modify this threshold for the sale area. So it might change later on, but for now, this is for economic operator to have no more than 100 square meters of a sale area. Also are exempted, the economic operator, if their sale area is located on an island with a population of fewer than 2,000 inhabitants, or within a municipality with a population density less than 50% per kilometer square. But in any case, this article has to apply for the population center with more than 5,000 inhabitants. We have two other paragraphs that are of interest for us on the beverage packaging. Firstly, the paragraph 14, so it states that member states may allow final distributor to achieve the aforementioned objective by establishing a pool, but under certain conditions. In other words, final distributor can form a group to jointly meet the reuse target for beverage packaging. And in 2028, the European Commission will establish and specify the detailed condition and reporting requirements to be applied to those pooling arrangements, because it's not very clear yet. But what it says in the text for now is that pools must not exceed more than 40% of the market share of the relevant beverage category and shall consist of up to 5 final distributors. And this limitation does not apply, as I put it in the parentheses, if they operate under the same brand name. Secondly, and so that's the last point on the beverages packaging, the paragraph 11, it requires a final distributor to take back free of charge all the reusable packaging of the same type, shape, and size as the packaging they put on the market. So this is the take back obligation. That is a good thing, like to make it very easier for the consumer, of course, like when it's purchasing and bring it back to the same place or to other place that sell the same product. Now, let's come to the exemption within this text. So this one, I think one of the most controversial points in the negotiation of the Article 26, in particular, like the Parliament's version, that the one they proposed, had a huge number of exemption. There was the one from LCA, also the one from like separate collection rates. So there was many of them and they were like very unambitious. There was also on the side of the Council some exemptions, and the Commission has also exemptions. So when they come to the trilogue and they had to negotiate an agreement, the question was not, do we have exemption or not? It was sure that there will be exemption, but the debate was, okay, what kind of exemption will we have in this text? So at the end, the exemptions that they decided to have in the text are the following. So in the paragraph 15, it states that the economic operator don't have to meet the reuse target if they place less than 1,000 kilograms of packaging during a year on the market, or if they are considered as micro enterprise. Like in those two categories, they are not, they are exempted, sorry, from the reuse targets. Also, within the Article 26 and the paragraph 15b, it allows economic operator to be exempted if the member states in which they operate achieves a certain level of recycling. So more specifically, it states that member states may exempt economic operators for a period of 5 years if the following conditions are met. So first, so that's the first condition, the member states reaches 5% points above the targets for recycling of packaging waste material, packaging waste per material to be achieved by 2025, and also it's expected to reach 5% points above the 2030 targets. Here it refers to the targets, the recycling targets that were in the PPWD and now that are included in the PPWR. I think it's the Article 46. If you want to have a look. The second condition is that the member state is on track to fulfill the waste prevention targets as set out in the Article 38, and so the one I presented at the beginning, and they can demonstrate to have reached at least 3% waste prevention by 2028 compared to the year 2018. And also the last point, but this one is easy to fulfill, is like economic operators, they have to show that they have adopted corporate waste prevention and recycling plan. About this exemption, it's a bit difficult now, like to measure a bit what would be the impact. First of all, because you see the formulation, it gives the opportunity or not for the member state to choose to impose or not this exemption. So they may exempt economic operator or they may not. And secondly, because it's difficult also to predict where the member states will end up in terms of recycling and reduction targets. To have a bit of an idea, I went to see the early waste warning reports by 2022 that was published by the Commission last June. So it's the report that monitors the progress of member states in achieving their recycling targets. It's available on the Commission website. It's a very interesting report, and they also, so they have it for the whole European Union, but also per country. So if you want to have a look, it's very well done. But so yeah, I took the time to have a brief look at it, at the general one. And what they say is like several member states are considered likely to miss one or more of the material-specific targets for 2025. And for example, if you take plastic, it's 19 countries that won't meet the targets. And for glass, it's 10 countries. Aluminium, it's 9. Ferrous metal, 5. Paper and cardboard, it's 4 countries. And for wood, it's 2. Well, obviously, you see it's more like than 27 countries, but it means that some countries won't fulfill many of those targets. So in other words, if we just have a look at the recycling targets, it seems that few member states will be able to be exempted. So yeah, this is what it is for the general exemption of the text. It's a horizontal exemption. It's we try like to advocate to not have something like that, but for the purpose of having an agreement, the co-legislator decided on this one. And so yeah, we have to follow a bit how it will be put in place in a way. But now that we had a look on the reuse article, let's move on refill. And as we have requirements for refill, we also have for reuse, we also have requirements for refill that are also detailed in the annexes, but also in the article 25. So here, I would like to draw your attention on 5 points. First of all, economic operators, when they accept refill, they have to tell the consumer what container they accept, what container type they accept for refilling. Second, the refill station, they have to comply to the standard established in the Annex 6. Also, the packaging offered at refill station that do not meet the Annex 6 requirements or that are part of a deposit return system, so DRS, they should not be provided to the end consumer for free. The fourth point is that operator, they may refuse to refill a container if they deem it's unhygienic. And also something important is that they are not responsible, economic operators, for hygiene issues associated with the use of a container provided by non-consumers. And last but not least, by 2030, a distributor with a sale area of over 400 square meters, they are pushed to dedicate 10% of their retail space to refill station for food and non-food products. But as the way it's written, it is not abiding targets. And now about takeaway. So if you are operating in the takeaway sector, I'm sure you have heard about that, but in the first version of the text by the Commission, it did contain objective for the takeaway sector, but at the end, it wasn't retained in the final agreement. Instead, we have two articles, the 28A and 28B that were proposed by the Parliament. So for the 28A, it says that 2 years after the text come into force, the final distributors operating in takeaway for food and drink shall provide a system for consumer to bring their own containers to be filled. This has to be possible at no higher costs and in no less favorable condition than for single-use packaging. Also, the final distributor, they have to inform the end consumer of this possibility. The second article is the article 28B, and this one concerns always takeaway as well, but this time not for refill and for reuse. It's for reuse. So the article states that 3 years after the entry into force of the text, the final distributor in the HoReCa sector who place drinks or food in the market in takeaway, they shall provide the consumer the option of packaging within a system of reuse. Also, the same for the previous article, the final distributor must inform the consumer and supply it at the same price and under the same condition. Finally, in the subparagraph 5 of this article, it stipulates that the economic operator shall hand over from 2030, offer 10% of product in a reusable packaging format. But once again, now you're familiar with it, the expression shall hand over implies that it's not binding. Okay, now before moving to the conclusion, I have one last slide on the flexibility. So that's a subject that we have been working on at New Era, like to ensure that this regulation, which is as explained like a regulation, so the aim of this regulation is to harmonize the role at the member states. is not a race to the bottom, but it's not a race to the bottom, but a minimum that will allow ambitious member states to exceed. But also very important for us that it's not like a backtracking this law. So on this topic, the PPWR provides a certain degree of flexibility that gives the member states the room to go over what is set in the text. The general idea behind this flexibility is that flexibility is permitted if it helps to achieve the objective of the Article 38, so the one on the right side of the screen, the aim is to reduce the packaging waste. So here we have the paragraph 17 and 17b of the Article 26, where it says that member states may set higher targets than those provided for in this regulation if this makes it possible to achieve the objective of the Article 38. Also, the member states can set targets for other beverages, packaging, if this makes it possible to achieve these reduction targets. This same principle applies to the 10% reuse targets I just presented, from the Article 28A for the takeaway packaging. Also, we have the article in the Article 26, the paragraph 17E. It provides that the Commission will present in 2034 a report reviewing the implementation of the 2030 targets and evaluating the feasibility of the achievement of the targets set for 2040. So that's the moment they will discuss about the targets. That's why they are not binding yet. Okay, so now we'll move on to the conclusion. So just to briefly summarize, so the agreement was reached on the 4th of March. As you say, there's still some uncertainties, and what I've presented today is an initial analysis we've made with New Era, but we need to make some more, to deep dive a bit more into the text, because there are some provisions that are not exactly clear on the way, particularly this will put this text in force. So that's something also we are to discuss with the Commission about. Nevertheless, this regulation is really a first step, it's the first legislative tone at the European level for reuse and the refill sector. For a long time, the legislative door for reuse was closed, and we believe it's a victory for our sector. We opened the door, we put our foot in the door, and now we just have to open it even more for more reuse and refill within the European Union. And also the battle is not over yet, that's what I put, because there is still the delegated act that has to be discussed and negotiated, as well as the execution act that has to be discussed as well. And to finish, maybe I would like to present briefly the timeline. So that has been the agreement. There will be the votes at the final plenary session at the end of April. Then there will be the European election. So there will be a new European Parliament. I have to approve this legislation again. And then it will be able to be approved by the Council. So we expect it's a Q4 2024. And then after it's published in the official journal, it will be put in force 18 months after that, so in mid-2060. But in the run-up to the implementation and even before the election, the reuse and refill industry is not taking a break. And this is why we are inviting you to the Reuse and the Refill Trade Fair. So that's an event we are organizing with Réseau Vrac et Réemploi, so the French trade association, with New Era and Aircube. The idea is to create an international encounter of reuse to make Paris the epicenter of reuse and refill for the 13th and the 4th of May. It will be a place where there will be more than 250 exhibitors. We expect to have 2,000 visitors, 12 sectors represented, and we will have also masterclasses and conference, workshop. So yeah, if you're interested to come, just contact us or just scan this QR code. Thank you very much.
Ulysse, thank you so much for this comprehensive but also quick presentation. And as we've seen, there are a lot of obligations, complicated obligations with exemptions, and we already got a great bunch of questions in the chat. So I already want to announce that we probably have some more minutes after 12 to answer all these questions. And if you are ready enough time to stay a couple of minutes longer, it would be great. Yes, because now I want to give the floor for some minutes to the 3 companies we invited here. So that's Eva from Corplex, Davide from Sykell, and Thomas from Sielaff. So please put on your camera and your microphones. I will ask you a couple of questions on what is your view on the PPWR. But before I'm coming to this, just to announce we are over 130 participants here. So great that this interest was so great. And coming up very quickly to our icebreaker question. So most of you have had a look already in the PPWR, ranging from 1 or 2 times to up to 20 times, and Ulysse couldn't count. So yeah, that was the answers from the chat. So Eva, let's start with you. Corplex is working in the transport sector. You are an international company, but also you do e-commerce packaging. And we've just seen that there are targets for your sector being 40% for 2030 and then 70% a non-binding target for 2040. What do you think? Is this an ambitious target? Is it a target you can reach in the transport sector? Does it has an effect at all? Are you happy with the targets? So what is your view on those obligations in particular?
Well, the obligations of 40% actually for everything that is kind of transport packaging, but there is 100% obligation as well for everything that is intra-company. Okay, so between 2 sites owned by the same company. So it's definitely a very ambitious target, and it's on January 1st, 2030. So we really have less than 6 years to get there. The targets are ambitious. However, actually, they have a major caveat to them, and is that cardboard boxes are accepted from that, which is definitely, I mean, transport packaging, the bulk of transport packaging is really done in cardboard boxes. So the fact that cardboard boxes are exempted definitely is a huge letdown. In terms of what options are there available in the market today, to make these targets a reality, options are definitely there. There is a whole range of foldable boxes, large containers, reusable pallets. There is all the transport packaging elements that are reusable. We manufacture them. Other companies do as well. They can be made to measure. They are the standard formats as well. So the options are there. It's just that we were hoping maybe for a PPWR that will be a little bit more ambitious, not in the reuse targets, but that will be a little bit more material neutral, so that these reuse targets could be effectively implemented. But the fact that the cardboard boxes are still going to be there, well, that's definitely, it's 95% of the transport packaging is done in cardboard boxes.
Okay, so you were probably in particular hoping that there isn't an exemption for cardboard. Is cardboard still so much used in in-house transport from one company place to another? Yes, so
Yes.
it's also
Yes,
okay.
there is.
And there is also the exemption. So
Yes.
that's also okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there is. However, actually, we'll see. There is a delegated act that is going to specify the minimum number of rotations, okay, the minimum number of reuses as well. We will see, because we know that cardboard can definitely complete 5 reuses and 5 rotations. Plastic and other materials can definitely complete a much higher number. So whether this legislation is definitely going to move the needle towards reusable packaging will depend very much on that delegated act, on the minimum number of rotations. So we're definitely very curious about that one, and I'm very hopeful that it will be a little bit more ambitious than the text itself.
Okay, perfect. And are there any other obligations within the PPWR? I mean, we focus now a lot on reuse and refill, but scratched a little recycling target, but there are a lot of other obligations in the document. Is there anything else you are affected in your company or in the whole sector? Is there any other obligations where you think, okay, that's very valid for us? Or
there is something on plastics, actually. And it's not clear to me, actually, in the PPWR, what's going to happen with the shrink wrap that normally gets put around the pallets, okay? Because it's, I believe that single uses that are thinner than 5 microns are actually going to be banned from the market. All the other flexible plastics actually are still going to be allowed for as long as they reach a minimum recycling target. For this type of stretch film that gets put around the pallets, the reuse target and the recycle targets right now, or the recycle rates right now, are extremely, extremely low because the economics are not there to make this film recyclable. Okay, not because the technology is there, it's just because really the economics are not there. It's very cheap and the recycle is very expensive, so it's not happening. So it will, I will definitely be curious to see, because it's very undoubtful that the member states will reach those targets for shrink wrap. And if they don't, what's going to happen to cardboard boxes actually that needs to be held together during transport? So there could be still opportunities, actually further opportunities for reusable transport packaging, but a lot will depend on what's going to happen with the minimum number of rotations and minimum number of reuses that will be decided in a delegated act, as well as the ability of the member states to reach the minimum recycled targets for this shrink wrap.
Thank you very much, Eva, for your view on these things. Davide, you're working in a bit different sector, in the takeaway to go sector for food and drinks, and also cooperating a lot with the retail sector, with Rewe, for example, and also connected to refill stations, where reusable packaging of Sykell now is used. What about you? What about the targets? Are you happy with the outcome of the PPWR? How are you communicating? I've seen that you communicate already on your website and taking the PPWR as an argument. So what's your view on things?
For us, it's let's say a simple approach, because the Article 28B, it's pretty much a copy-paste of the current German legislation, the package legislation number 33 that is currently in Germany. Plus, they also, in the PPWR, remove one of the limitations of the German legislation, which is the type of packaging that you can use as an exception. So there is no limitation of material or other types of limitation for this article. So for us, it's great. We're basically expanding the market that we see already in Germany to be one of the most advanced legislation in Europe to the entire continent in a way. And combining this with a refill creates kind of a perfect combination, because our focus is, of course, on retailers, so to scaling things. And this is something where there is a need for legislation, right? So because big players, high volumes, create a lot of positive effects. Clearly, when you have a pilot projects, costs are terribly high. When you introduce legislation where big players have to actually switch towards a reusable system, costs can also decrease for the entire market, for entire markets, which make things quite more exciting for everyone. This is also why we've been kind of obsessed with the concept of scaling. So how to make things work at a higher level. And this is why we communicate already for our software, so the Circular ERP, kind of a perfect solution for anybody who wants to, not reinvent the wheel, but just focus on the direct setup of the system, depending on the different uniqueness of each market, and then using the advantages of the system already built. I personally see within this framework of the PPWR a lot of different local differences, right? So countries where there is, for instance, an already existing fund system, deposit system, Northern Central Europe will be approaching the PPWR in a different way than Southern Europe, where there is no infrastructure at the moment. So we're gonna see still a very heterogeneous approach across Europe, my perspective.
Okay, but as I understood, right, the refill targets are not binding, if this is correct. Are you still, do you still think it's an argument? Are you expecting in the next year that it's going to be binding, because now it's a non-binding and then it swaps to a binding
Usually a very optimistic person, but when I see something non-binding, I can get like, this is never going to happen, right? In any case, if you look at the obligation of offering reusable, this is a massive change. So if things are done properly, meaning there are controls and all establishments that have to offer reusable are actually doing that, customer don't need a target. So when you have this combination of effects, right? So it's a convenient system. There is a proper communication. So customers, final user, they know why it's in there, right? And it's, you know, in their own interest. We've seen that this combination of effects is already good enough to reach more than 10% target. So it will potentially help us later on, like having like a more 30-40% target over, you know, the next following years. But for the start, it's much more than enough, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Davide. Coming to Thomas, you are working in the area of providing reverse vending machines, in particular for bottled beverage, but also for to-go and takeaway boxes and cups. So what do you think about the PPWR? Maybe in particular with a few on the beverage sector and the targets there. Does it have an effect or not? To your business and also to the beverage business. Yeah,
thank you. I mean, the two sides or two aspects. We have this single-use plastic and the recycling. There's something with the deposit return systems we see in some countries working pretty well, and then we have the reusables. Before that is actually, now we have a regulation EU-wide, or we will have a regulation which is EU-wide working. So we will have to have systems in each single country. We will improve the single-use plastic because there are higher quotes in there. So this is mandatory, and for the reusables. If you see that as a consumer, you are in the retail area, and the machines, at least for systems for countries, they have a deposit return system already. It's pretty convenient to go there and hand over your containers to this machine, and then this is part of the whole circular economy. So it's like we have this with the Sykell, we have a process actually running where you can use refill containers and put it back to the reverse vending machine. And this is done in the logistic process, cleaned and comes back to the consumer. And I agree with David. It has to be as convenient as possible for the consumer. So he actually enjoys handing the reusables back to whatever, a machine, a person, or whatever. Before that, it's very necessary that the person actually knows about the systems, the possibility he has or she has.
Okay, yes, we have a lot of questions in the chat, and thank you very much for your statements. It was nice to have a few on the different sectors, and also very valid. But let's pick up some questions before we do that, and Anna will help me with it because
yes, indeed. Thank you.
Hold on a second. Thanks to everybody who answered already. Fernando, I've seen you answer already some questions, and also others. And before we go into the question, Anna will also post a little survey, just be posted now, satisfactory survey for the webinar here. So if you have time afterwards or night, besides we are answering the question, please provide us with some feedback. It would be great. Anna, now the floor is yours.
Yes, so I'm just pasting the survey link into the chat box as well, if you have time to look at it now or later on. And yes, indeed, there are lots of questions on the chat, and kindly Fernando, representing the same organization as our main speaker, Ulysse, New Era, has already been answering many of them on the chat. Fernando, if you want to wave and show yourself, because many of the people were corresponding and communicating with you via chat. So thank you for the answers. So I will just go quickly through a few maybe discussions in case you were not able to follow all the communication on chat. There were quite a few questions on transport packaging. So Andrea mentioned there are so many exemptions for transport packaging. So what is actually forbidden? What has changed? Fernando commented that it's difficult to give a complete answer, but it does impact all single-use packaging for transport and e-commerce packaging, except cardboard boxes, flexible containers, and transporting food, and containers transporting dangerous goods. So apart from that, everything is impacted. There was also a question from Beverly regarding cardboard boxes. Is it just cardboard boxes? And what about envelopes? And the comment here was indeed it's only boxes, which Fernando commented is a bit of a nonsense as the material used in a box is way higher than the one in an envelope. Is way higher. I'm not sure, Fernando, what you meant.
So yeah, my understanding is the following. Hello, good morning, everyone. For transport package or e-commerce, let's say you could send something in an envelope, which is way thinner and it uses way less material than a box. And the stupidity of it is that the box will be exempted, whereas a cardboard envelope or a paper envelope will not be exempted.
Okay, so there is actually less material used in the envelope, but it.
Imagine that would mean that, okay, so I now need to comply with some reuse targets. The envelope is part of this reusable, so I may want to shift towards a box, which may use more material because the box is exempted.
And just to also fill in from the other comments, there was a question, does this apply for e-commerce? Yes. Does this apply for B2B also about the cardboard boxes? Yes. There was also a question whether the mandatory reuse of transport packaging within member states, same state, 10% target per 2030 or already 2026. And Fernando, you mentioned your understanding is as of entry into force, so mid-26, but merits to be double checked. So we're not completely sure on this one. There was also a question about pallets, whether there will be a minimum number of reuse applied. I don't know if we have a question. A minimum number of reuse applied on disposable pallets, then they are no longer disposable. I don't know if Ulysse, you want to comment on pallets?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Yeah, that was a question from, sorry, we can ask the person.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, it's Martin Meurs. What I see in the market is that there are still a lot of pallets being put into the supply chain as one-way pallet because of the fragmented supply chain. Are there the same rules applied as on carton boxes to say, hey, there will be a minimum number of reuses applied on pallets that are now put in the supply chain as one-way pallet?
Yeah, the pallets that have to be reusable, they have to achieve they have to be reused as many times as they can. But for now, there are no minimum rotation number. It's going to be defined by the Commission 2 years after the entry into force, but they will say, okay, if for packaging to be reusable, it has to do at least, it was proposed by the Council, for example, at least 10 times. But nowadays, within the text, we don't have like a minimum rotation number.
Clear.
Okay, thank you for this answer. And maybe we can move on to also some questions regarding and comments regarding refill and takeaway so that we kind of spread across the different areas of the PPWR. So there was a comment from Catherine Conway from Go and Package that it's a shame there isn't a provision that the supply chain packaging that powers the refill station has to be reusable, so there can still be single use behind the refill station. And a comment that's such a missed opportunity to drive reuse. And regarding takeaway, there was a question whether there are exemptions for the takeaway sector, and if yes, what are they? Because we had so many for transport packaging.
There are no specific exemption for the takeaway sector because there are no binding targets. So it's like a recommendation that you have to provide like the 10%, for example, of reusable packaging in 2030. It's not mandatory, so there are no exemption yet. So yeah, I wouldn't say there is exemption. And about refill, there is a disposition saying that you cannot, it's the Article 25 saying that you cannot provide for free a container that does not comply to the Annex 6 or that is not reusable in a way. So the single-use packaging for refill wouldn't be considered as refill if it's single-use. I don't know if it's clear the way I put it, but yeah, in the Article 5, it displays this fact.
I think the comment there was about the kind of the transport packaging of the products that go into refuel stations.
Oh yeah, okay, no, I try.
Yeah.
Don't have anything.
And okay, and on another area, well, in general, about the overall waste reduction targets, there was a question from Lucy. What is the measuring point, the criteria when something is waste? I guess we have that somewhere in the legislation, maybe not exactly in PPWR.
We have for sure something that says that we will, like the Commission will have to define clearly how to, it's delegated act, I think it's 2 years after the entry into force, like where the Commission, or maybe later, I think it's 2028, so yeah, 2 years after the entry into force, where they have to detail the way like they will gather the information and also, yeah, like the methodology they will use to do that.
So that is still something we're waiting for. And then a few other questions. Well, when it comes to the current text, this version and what can still happen, there was a question from Alexandra Berendes from Recap. Is there a possibility that any further amendments, changes in the text as it is now could be realized? And also maybe together with this question, two more, one from Nicolas. What do you think about the corrigendum procedure? Do you think there is a risk that the text changes in the coming months? And also from Ingeborg, is there still room for discussion within the European Parliament?
It is a good question. We have been looking at the corrigendum procedure. It's a pretty complex one. We had discussion with the parliamentary assistant of RIS team, so the rapporteurs team, and for them as well, it's still not very clear exactly how it could work because most of it is quite implicit. So corrigendum procedure is very common, like something that really happen when there is like election, because you have that when you don't have the time to translate the text in all the official language of the European Union. So you need like to first adopt it once, then you translate it, then you have to adopt it one more time with the new parliament. Usually what happens, like they accept it once and there is an implicit rule saying, okay, we don't change it anymore because it has been accepted. And it's just because of the time constraint that we have to re-adopt it. However, it's possible that new amendments, it's possible it happens, but it's very, very unlikely. And it is very unlikely also because the text is created a great compromise, like taking like the European Parliament red line, also like the Council one. And then so from our understanding at NEURA, it's very unlikely there will be amendments, but we cannot ensure 100% that there won't be any change. And for the question, can we still influence the text? It's very, very unlikely. Well, if you have lots of resources to try to do it, you can, but otherwise, like it's maybe a bit of a waste of time to try to influence the text right now.
Thank you. And maybe one final question. Are biopolymers at all mentioned in PPWR? In any context? I believe so, yes.
Yeah, it's mentioned within the Article 7 on the recycled contents. They didn't decide something yet. They want to see a bit the advancement of the technology. So there is like a sub-paragraph explaining that, okay, first now because it's mostly that it was discussed for the recycling content in corporation. Can you use, for example, bioplastic or biopolymers? Here it's not defined yet, and the Commission have to assess the technology and they have to come with an amendment, like a new proposal for that in the coming years. But if you're looking for the precise information, it's the Article 7.
Okay, Nicole, I don't know if you want to also add any additional questions from our list.
Yes, there are some more questions, but some of them are already answered in the chat, so I think it's fine for now. You are very much invited to continue the discussion at Planet Reuse in our chat. We have a legal chat. Just address the chat, and we will also forward it to Ulysse and Fernando if we can not provide the answer. Please feel free to do, and we will also have afterwards look at the chat if there are really some unanswered
Yeah, or
questions.
maybe if there is something we didn't, yeah,
It is
sorry,
complex
if we
regulation,
didn't
so-
touch on something that has been coming up repeatedly, maybe someone can still use the mic for the last 3 minutes if there is something we did not at all touch and missed it in the chat that is important and that many people were curious about.
No. Okay. If nobody takes the word, yeah, we will follow up with the question also. Thank you so much, Ulysse, Fernando, and the speakers from the company to giving the insights, to be prepared so well, Ulysse, with this, yeah, with the obligations and all the new stuff in the PPWR. It is a document which will not be finished now, but will probably accompany us over the next couple of months and years. So yes, thank you so much. You are invited, as I said, to follow the conversation on Planet Reuse. And also you can have a look at the replay. We publish it on YouTube, and also the presentation we will going to publish in our insight section on the platform. So if you're not registered to the platform, please be invited to do so, and also be invited to put your solutions on the platform, because that's a part partly missing in the platform. We have 70 solutions, really packaging solutions, reusable packaging solutions, but we want to increase this number to really show, okay, what are the solutions, in particular for the people who are looking for reusable packaging solutions from the retail sector, from other sectors. Thank you so much for participating, and yes, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope I see you all again in the next webinar, which will be about curious things and curious packaging, like bicycles and tires and large stuff and paintings in reusable packaging. Okay, thank you so much, and see you next time.